What happens when a woman's desperate need for love leads her straight into the most dangerous trap of her life? The answer will shock you. This is the story of Mary Adewale, a woman who had everything money could buy, but nothing her heart truly needed. She lived in a mansion that echoed with silence, married to a man who treated her like expensive furniture. But when someone finally showed her kindness, she made a choice that would change everything. And the man she trusted most was already planning her destruction. Mary Adewale stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her mansion's master bedroom, watching the city lights twinkle below like distant stars. The silk curtains felt cold against her fingertips as she pulled them shut, blocking out the world that saw her as untouchable. But inside these walls, she was just a woman drowning in loneliness. The mansion stretched around her like a beautiful prison. Marble floors reflected the light from crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors stared down from the walls. Every room was perfect, every surface polished to perfection. But perfection, Mary had learned, was just another word for empty. She heard the front door slam shut downstairs. Mark was leaving again. Another business trip, he'd mumbled over breakfast, not even looking up from his phone. The same excuse he'd used for the past 3 years. Mary knew better than to ask questions anymore. The first few times, she tried to show interest, tried to be the supportive wife. But Mark's cold responses had taught her to stay silent. "Mrs. Adewale," a soft voice called from the hallway. Mary turned to see April, her 17-year-old daughter, standing in the doorway. The girl's designer clothes couldn't hide the sadness in her eyes. April had inherited her mother's sharp intelligence, but also her loneliness. In this house, they were both prisoners of their own wealth. "Yes, dear." Mary's voice came out more tired than she intended. "Dad left already. He didn't even say goodbye." April's words hung in the air like an accusation. Mary wanted to comfort her daughter, to explain that sometimes adults grow apart, that love isn't always enough. But how could she explain something she didn't understand herself? Instead, she just nodded and turned back to the window. The truth was, Mary barely remembered the man she'd married 15 years ago. Mark had been different then, charming, attentive, full of grand plans and bigger dreams. He'd swept her off her feet with expensive dinners and weekend trips to Paris. Back then, his ambition had seemed romantic. Now it felt like a wall between them. Mary's business empire had grown alongside their marriage's decay. While Mark disappeared into his mysterious work, she built a company that employed thousands. Boardrooms feared her sharp tongue and sharper mind. Competitors whispered about her ruthless tactics. But none of them knew that the woman who could destroy careers with a single phone call couldn't even get her own husband to stay for dinner. The house felt different when Mark was gone. Quieter, but also somehow less suffocating. Mary found herself walking through rooms she usually avoided, touching furniture that felt more like museum pieces than belongings. She bought this mansion to impress people, to show the world that Mary Adewale had made it. But success, she discovered, was just another kind of loneliness. Mrs. Chun, the elderly housekeeper, had been talking about retirement for months. Her arthritis made the stairs difficult, and the mansion was too big for one person to maintain properly. Mary had been dreading the conversation about finding a replacement. She hated change, hated the idea of training someone new, of letting another stranger into her carefully controlled world. "We need to talk about finding someone to help Mrs. Chun," April said, as if reading her mother's thoughts. "She's been struggling with the heavy cleaning." Mary sighed. "I know. I've been putting it off. There's this guy who helped at Sarah's house last month. Her mom said he was really good, really honest. Maybe we could try him." The idea of hiring a man made Mary uncomfortable. She'd grown used to Mrs. Chen's quiet presence, the way the older woman moved through the house like a gentle ghost. A man would be different, more noticeable. But Mrs. Chen couldn't handle the work alone anymore, and Mary couldn't bear the thought of letting her go entirely. "What's his name?" Mary asked. "Aid. That's all I know. Sarah's mom has his number if you want it." Aid. Such a simple name. Mary found herself wondering what kind of person would choose housework as a career. In her world, people climbed ladders, fought for promotions, stepped on others to get ahead. The idea of someone content with cleaning and organizing seemed almost foreign. But maybe foreign was what this house needed. Maybe someone who didn't know about her reputation, who didn't see her as the ice queen of the business world, could bring something different to these cold rooms. "Get me his number," Mary said finally. "We'll give him a try." April smiled, the first genuine smile Mary had seen from her daughter in weeks. "I'll call Sarah's mom right now." As April hurried away, Mary remained at the window. The city below pulsed with life, millions of people going about their evening routines. Somewhere out there was a man named Aid who might soon become part of their strange, quiet world. Mary had no idea that the simple decision would change everything. 3 days later, the doorbell rang at exactly 9 in the morning. Mary had been expecting it, but the sound still made her jump. She'd been sitting in her office, pretending to review contracts while actually staring out the window, wondering what this Aid person would be like. Mrs. Chen's footsteps shuffled slowly toward the front door. Mary heard muffled voices, then Mrs. Chun calling up the stairs. "Mrs. Adewale, he's here." Mary took a deep breath and walked downstairs. Standing in her marble foyer was a young man who looked nothing like what she'd expected. Aid was probably in his mid-20s, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. He wore simple clothes, clean jeans and a pressed shirt, and held a small bag that probably contained his few belongings. "Good morning, Mrs. Adewale," he said, his voice soft but confident. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity." There was something about his manner that caught Mary off guard. No nervousness, no obvious attempt to impress her. Just genuine gratitude and a quiet dignity that she rarely encountered in her world of ambitious climbers and smooth talkers. "Mrs. Chen will show you around and explain your duties," Mary said, keeping her voice businesslike. "The position includes room and board. Your quarters are above the garage." Aid nodded respectfully. "That's very generous. I promise you won't regret hiring me." As Mrs. Chun led him away, Mary found herself watching his retreating figure. There was something different about him, something that made the huge house feel less empty just by his presence. She shook her head, annoyed at herself for such foolish thoughts, and returned to her office. But over the next few days, Mary couldn't ignore the changes Aid brought to the mansion. The windows sparkled with a clarity she hadn't seen in years. The floors gleamed without a single streak or smudge. Even the air seemed fresher, as if Aid had somehow managed to clean away the staleness that had settled into every corner. More than his work, though, it was his presence that transformed the space. Aid moved through the house, quietly but not timidly. He hummed softly while he worked, old songs that Mary didn't recognize but found oddly comforting. When he encountered April in the hallways, he always greeted her with a warm smile that made the teenager's face light up in response. Mary began finding excuses to be in the same rooms where Aid was working. She told herself she was just checking his progress, making sure he was worth the money she was paying him. But the truth was more complicated. Aid's gentle presence made her feel something she'd almost forgotten: peace. "Mom, he's really nice," April said one evening as they sat at the long dining table, eating dinner in their usual silence. "Aid, I mean. He actually listens when I talk." Mary looked up from her untouched salad. "What do you talk about?" "School stuff. Friends. He doesn't judge me like most adults do. And he's funny too, not trying too hard funny, just naturally funny." Mary felt a strange pang of something that might have been jealousy. When was the last time April had described anyone as naturally funny? When was the last time her daughter had smiled the way she'd been smiling lately? "He's just the help, April," Mary said, but the words felt wrong as soon as she spoke them. April's smile faded. "I know that, Mom. I'm not stupid. I just think it's nice to have someone around who doesn't act like showing basic kindness is some kind of weakness." The comment stung because Mary knew it was aimed at her. She'd become so used to keeping people at arm's length, so afraid of appearing vulnerable, that she'd forgotten how to simply be kind. But Aid seemed to carry kindness like other people carried wallets, naturally, without thinking about it. That night, Mary found herself walking through the house later than usual. She often suffered from insomnia, especially when Mark was away on his mysterious business trips. The mansion felt different in the darkness, less like a showpiece and more like what it really was, a home where people lived and breathed and felt lonely. She was surprised to see light coming from the kitchen. Mrs. Chin was usually asleep by 8, and April rarely ventured downstairs after dinner. Mary moved quietly toward the light, curious. Aid was sitting at the kitchen island, reading a worn paperback book by the light of a single lamp. He looked up when he heard her footsteps, and Mary expected him to jump up, to apologize for using the kitchen, to make some excuse for being there. Instead, he smiled. Couldn't sleep either? The simple question, asked without judgment or prying curiosity, somehow broke something loose inside Mary's chest. She found herself walking into the kitchen instead of turning away. I don't sleep well when the house is quiet, she admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. Aide gestured to the chair across from him. Want some company? I was just reading, but I don't mind talking. Mary hesitated. Everything about the situation was inappropriate. She was the employer, he was the employee. She was Mary Adewale, feared businesswoman. He was just a young man who cleaned her house. But the loneliness that had been eating at her for years was stronger than propriety. She sat down. What are you reading? She asked. Aide held up the book. Poetry. I know it's not very manly, but I like the way poets can say complicated things with simple words. Mary stared at him. In her world, men read business magazines and financial reports. Mark used to mock her for reading novels, calling them a waste of time. The idea of a man choosing poetry seemed almost revolutionary. Read me something, she found herself saying. Aide looked surprised but pleased. He flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for, then read in his soft, steady voice. The way a crow shakes down on me the dust of snow from a hemlock tree has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. The simple words hung in the air between them. Mary felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of tension she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten it was there. That's beautiful, she whispered. It's Frost, Aide said. He had a way of finding magic in ordinary moments. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kitchen feeling warmer and more alive than it had in years. Mary found herself studying Aide's face in the lamplight, noticing the way his eyes crinkled slightly when he smiled, the gentle strength in his hands as he turned the pages of his book. Why do you do this work? She asked suddenly. You're obviously educated, intelligent. You could do other things. Aide considered the question seriously. I like taking care of things. There's something honest about cleaning, about making spaces beautiful for people to live in. And I like the quiet. Most jobs are full of noise and stress, and people trying to climb over each other. This is peaceful. Mary thought about her own job, the constant battles and negotiations, the way every conversation was a chess match where showing weakness meant losing everything. Aide's world seemed like a different planet. Don't you want more? She pressed. Success, recognition, money? Aide smiled, that gentle smile that was becoming familiar. I have enough. A roof over my head, food to eat, work that doesn't hurt anyone. Most people in the world would consider that rich. Mary felt a strange ache in her chest. When was the last time she felt grateful for what she had instead of constantly reaching for more? When had enough stopped being enough? They talked until nearly midnight, about books and dreams, and the way the city looked different depending on which window you viewed it from. Mary found herself laughing, actually laughing, for the first time in months. Aide had a way of seeing humor in small things, of finding joy in moments that Mary would have overlooked entirely. When she finally went upstairs to bed, Mary lay awake thinking about their conversation. She'd revealed more about herself in 2 hours than she'd shared with Mark in the past 2 years. And Aide had listened without judgment, without trying to fix her or change her, or use her words against her later. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Mary fell asleep with a smile on her face. The late-night conversations became a routine. Almost every evening when the house grew quiet, Mary would find herself drawn to the kitchen where Aide would be reading, or sometimes just sitting quietly, thinking. They never planned these meetings, but they both seemed to need them. Mary began to see her world through Aide's eyes, and everything looked different. The mansion she'd always seen as a symbol of her success started feeling like what it really was, a home. Aide had a way of noticing small details that brought warmth to cold spaces. He'd move a vase of flowers to catch the morning light just right, or open certain windows to create a cross breeze that made the whole house feel alive. You have a gift, Mary told him one evening as they sat in the kitchen sharing tea. This place feels completely different since you've been here. Aide looked surprised. I just pay attention to what a house needs. Most people are too busy to notice, but houses have personalities just like people do. What's this house's personality? Mary asked, genuinely curious. Abe thought for a moment, his eyes scanning the kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. "Lonely," he said finally. "This house is lonely. It's beautiful and proud, but it's been empty for too long. It wants to be filled with laughter and conversation and the kind of messiness that comes from people actually living in it instead of just existing in it." Mary felt tears prick her eyes. Abe had described her house perfectly, but she knew he was really describing her. April began